Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
Play artist, right on dynamite.
Playing artist right on dynamite. MP3 music search only on Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury vehicles. Sync. Say the word.
Welcome back to yet another edition of MacBreak Studio. Here in the studio, I have none other than Bryan Gary.
Mr. Martin.
Good to see you again.
Likewise.
Today we're going to talk about backward engineering someone else's compressor presets.
Yeah, it's really sexy, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that aside, I mean, did you wake up one morning and said, you're on the pillow and you just kind of woke up, I want a master compressor. I mean, what is it with you and compressor? What is it? What's the affinity for all things encoding with you?
Well, I think it's two things. One, it was an open field. It's like when I started working with Compressor, and there was like 5 million Final Cut Pro books and everything, and so when you and I started talking about doing training, I was just like, well, what's the product that no one's doing anything on? Well, Compressor. But then as I got into it, the liberation and the freedom of being able to actually create that final piece and not being stymied by the fact that I've got my content and it's really great, but I have no way to share it. And I have to trust all those months or years of work into somebody else's hands for that final thing that everyone's going to see. No one's coming to my studio to watch the final version. They're seeing the encode.
Like as a producer, you're like, the bit stops here. Sorry. So I could actually take your movies that you've spent months thinking about the encoding and the keyframe frequency, and I could just drop it onto this auto detect, and that's what Bryan used.
Exactly.
Is it really like that?
And if there was only a way that I could rip off Mark Spencer's Motion stuff like that, just like take his project files and along with the Make It Look Better filter, and just throw it into Speed Freaks, I'd be,
great. Well, show us how auto detect works.
It's actually a pretty cool little feature that they've added. I mean, and there are some caveats before I go into it, but basically, I have a QuickTime movie here. And I can kind of look at it and see that it's, an M4V, so it's probably some version of H.264. I could launch it into QuickTime and look at the get info.
Right.
But what's nice is that I can actually drag this already encoded movie onto the custom folder of the settings window and then let go. And it's going to think for a little bit. And we'll get a little...
There's no indication that it's thinking?
Well,
there it goes.
Spinning Beach Full of Work.
Spinning Beach Full of Work.
So what it's doing is it's analyzing the movie's metadata. It's actually not going in, set the record straight, it's actually not going in and analyzing the actual encoding. It's looking at the wrapper, it's looking at all the metadata that gets put in there by applications like Compressor or Episode or things like that. So the more metadata is in the file, the better off that the more precise this will be, what you get on the other side. So again, it's going to think for a little bit, and then what happens is it's going to place inside of your
look at that
settings folder.
It actually made a setting.
It did. It did. And look, it not only did it make a setting, I didn't tell it it was an iPod. If we look in the inspector here, it actually went and said, oh, this movie was created using Compressor's iPod presets. And it actually said it exactly how this particular movie was encoded. So maybe you download one of the trailers from the Apple site. Maybe someone sends you a file that you're like, wow, this really looks good. I wonder how they did it. Meaning, what was the data rate set at? All those things that really,
Can you block somebody from the...
Yeah, well, maybe. Maybe I want to block you.
I never met a data I didn't like.
That's right.
Sorry. So I'm just curious. I mean, is there any way to control how much metadata is associated with the final file deliverable?
No, not really. And to be honest, I mean, at some point you run against the firewall of quality. Meaning, if I have crappy footage and I take a great preset, it's not going to look like a trailer from the Apple site because they're starting with really good stuff. I mean, we go back to rule one of encoding, which is start with the best source possible.
Right.
So just because I have replicated their encoding settings doesn't mean I will be able to replicate their encode.
I see.
And you can take that one. you can get a tattoo, you need a T-shirt made up. They go along with the keyboard shortcut T-shirt.
Excellent.
So
you can do a variation of that with droplets, though.
Well,
too,
actually,
right?
I'm going to show you something with droplets that's kind of a safety net, because a lot of times you create a droplet in haste, meaning you find a setting that you like and you turn it into a droplet, and then you may delete the setting, you may come back to it later. So right here, I've got this droplet. If I double click on it, I get the droplets window.
Now, droplet's a little application.
Yeah, and what it is, it's a standalone application that allows you to process media without actually going into Compressor proper.
Right.
Okay? So if I want some information about this particular preset that's inside of here, I can click on the information button, but it really doesn't tell me much. It says I got an automatic frame rate and a 640 by 360 and file type, movie, estimate. It doesn't really know a lot about it because I'm kind of limited as to what this information will display. But let's say I'm in crunch time and I had an awesome preset that I turned into a droplet, and I'm either on a different machine or I've trashed the presets or whatever the case is. Here's a trick, a little undocumented trick for you to actually go and get the setting back into Compressor. If I right click on the droplet, you'll see I get the show package contents, which means that the droplet appears to be standalone, but it's just like Final Cut or Compressor. It's actually a package.
Yeah,
yes.
Open the hood.
So if I go into
its blasty innards.
Oh, so I go inside and look, I have a settings folder, and there's the actual .setting file. So if I option drag this guy into the custom folder, I now actually have this full preset that was used to create that droplet now back inside of Compressor. And I have access to everything. If frame controls were used, any kind of geometry, filters, things that you wouldn't see in the droplets window.
That is a fantastic trick.
Is it great?
It is great. I would put it under the great category.
Thank you.
Excellent. So is there anything else relative to pilfering other people's presets and settings?
Yes. No, I like to keep my Compressor episodes compressed.
Yes.
And short.
And,
brevity is the soul.
Right.
Point.
And on that note,
yes,
we want to thank you again for joining us in this highly compressed Compressor segment with Bryan Gary. My name is Steve Martin.
Wait, can I,
what?
I come here.
You've just stopped the encode, buddy.
I have. No, pause.
I
just paused the encode. If people want to see more of this, there's a place they can go. RippleTraining.com, you know it, I know it well. We're not going to feign that we're like, oh, Ripple Training, I never heard of that.
And the tutorial is Apple certified. He is actually getting a tattoo, an Apple certified tattoo.
Yeah, yes, Apple certified compressor training, which means it's been given the stamp of approval by Apple. And if you are so inclined, you can go and become an Apple certified end user by taking an exam.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve Martin, Bryan Gary.
Play artist, right on dynamite.
Playing artist right on dynamite. MP3 music search, just one of the many voice-activated features from Sync, only on Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury vehicles. Sync, say the word.